All right, so we are now into our financial unit, and we're going to start off the unit talking about simple interest, all right? So we've probably heard this term interest before just in our daily lives, but just to give you an example of what interest is, let's say you borrow $10 from me and I say, "Okay, I'll give you this $10, but, so I'll give you this $10, but in order to if I give you that $10, at the end of it, I want you to give me that $10 back, right? Because I'm not just going to give you $10, but plus $1, right? So you have to give me a little more than what I gave you, right? Because there's got to be some financial gain for me to just give you $10. Like, why am I going to give you $10? Well, this $1, that little bit extra, that is the interest, okay? So there is something and there is terms in this financial unit that you just have to understand. That $10 example I just used right there, the $10 would be what you call the principal. It's the initial amount, okay? It's just what have you borrowed or what have you put into the stock market. It's just what does initially happen in the problem. What is the money that you're starting with, all right? Then there's a interest rate, okay? So in my example, I didn't talk about a rate. I just did it very simple. You just have to give me $1, okay? But a lot of time in the real world, right, when you open a banking account or something like this, the bank is going to say, you know what, if you put your money into this checking account, we'll give you 2% on your money. Well, that 2%, that's an interest rate, okay? And we'll talk a little more in a second, but that's that interest rate right there. So now what makes simple interest simple? All right, and that's what today's lesson on is. We're just focusing on the simple interest. In tomorrow's lesson, we'll work on compound interest, okay? So what simple interest is, and we'll look at it in this example right here, in this investigation, all right? But before I start getting into it and actually start putting a bunch of numbers into this table here, because I don't want you to get lost in the math, what makes simple interest simple is the money that is accumulated only cares about the initial amount you put in, okay? So all the math that we are doing only accounts, and all the interest being applied only accounts for the $2,000 in this case that is initially applied, all right? It doesn't have this compounding effect, which is a little more complicated, but that's what we're going to do tomorrow. So suppose you take $2,000 and you invest it at 8% interest. How much is in the account at the end of 6 years? So in year 0, right? Nothing happens, right? You earn $0, nothing's changed. You still have your $2,000, okay? Nothing has happened with that. But now the first year goes by, so you've put your $2,000 into some account, right? And it's earned 8% interest. That's what it says right here, 8% interest. Well, 8% put into a decimal form, well, remember, you divide that by 100 to go into decimal, so that would be 0.08, and that's what this whole column is, right? Like that 0.08 is 8%. So the interest earned, well, the interest earned is your principal times your rate. So in this case, this column would be 2,000 right here, your principal, multiplying 0.08. I'm actually going to run out of room, so I'll just do the math off to the side here. This right here would be $2,000 multiplying your 0.08, and that would be $160. So total amount accumulated, like what would you, and including interest, well, like what would you have in your account? That's what this means, okay? So this column right here is now your principal plus your earned interest earned. Interest earned. Okay, so at the end of the first year, if you made $160 in interest, but you had initially $2,000, well, here you'd have $2,160 now because your principal 2,000 plus that 160. So what makes simple interest simple is this math that we do in this column right here. Because when I go to calculate the interest earned in my second year, I don't account for the fact that my account says now 2160, okay? all I care about in simple interest is take your initial amount and once again, apply your initial amount by your rate. So the next year you would still only make $160 because even though your account is technically worth more money, you would expect to have more interest earned. No, simple interest is purely based off what you initially put in. Okay, so each one of these columns is going to be $160, right? So now your total amount accumulated, this is where you just carry forward your previous amount. So now it's this number plus 160. So that would just now bring us to 2320. Okay? So all this column is going to be doing is we're just going to be adding up the interest that we just make each month, okay? But let's just do it in steps so we don't get lost. So year 3 ticks by, okay? Another year goes by. Well, my initial investment was still $2,000. I make 8% on that. So once again, I make another $160. Well, my account would now read the previous year's balance plus another $160. So I would be now at $480. Cool. Another year ticks by, 4th year. Well, again, I make $160 because it's still 8% of $2,000. All right, well, my account would now read $2,480 plus an additional $160. Sweet. Okay, so now I'm at what? 26, and that would be 40. Perfect. Another year takes by. Year 5 goes by. Still, you make another $160. 8% of 2,000. It's simple interest. See, the math is very simple. All we do is carry forward our previous year's balance, which was $2,640. Add another $160 to that because that's what we made that year in interest. So now that brings us to $2,800. All right, and your final year, the last year of owning this account, right? Because it lasts us only for 6 years. We take the $2,800, add another $160 to it, and your final balance would then be $2,960. Okay? So what pattern do you see in the table, and explain the pattern? So if you need, before I give you the answer, just pause the video and just try and guess for yourself before I give you the answer. But the pattern you should see is that each year that went by, we added $160. We just added $160 each year. That's all that happened each one of these times, okay? So what that means, if you were to graph it, I'm going to answer B really before I answer A. If you were to graph this, like you started at year zero with $2,000, every year that went by, you went up plus $160. Another year went by and you went up $160. And what would happen is, we graphed it. We literally said after 6 years, we should have 2,960. So after 6, we are now at 2,960, which would probably be right about here, give or take. So this would be our graph. My arrows are slightly off, but that's okay. So every tick, every time you go 1 year over, so this is actually my space, this would be plus $160, okay? A year goes by, you are going up plus $160. Well, go back to your math. What happens when you move over one and up the same amount each time, and when it is a constant pattern? Well, the pattern you see here is this is a linear pattern. A linear pattern, okay, right? The increase is constant. A constant $160, okay? So using the graph, and we plotted the number of years, right? So we plotted essentially X, and we plotted how much we made, which was Y in this column right here, right? We made a linear graph. We made linear. And we had a slope of this constant increase, this constant $160 right here. So the slope is linear with a slope of $160. All right. So you really have this equation, which would be y is how much money you make each year. So every year that ticks by, you multiply 160 and you add that to your initial $2,000. All right. A very simple linear equation. All right. What patterns do you see in the table? Explain the patterns. I feel like we've answered that, so let's just not answer that question. We've already answered that. It's a linear pattern, okay? So when we're calculating simple interest, all right, so like just purely how much money have you made, all right, there is this formula. This is not like your total amount earned. This is the interest earned, okay? So this formula is giving you essentially this part of the equation. It's like this part of our linear equation, right? It's not going to be plus your principal, okay? You see, we don't have the plus the p, the initial amount on the backside here. All this equation tells you is say, like, if you put it in for t years, right? If you put this in for t years at some percentage rate of whatever your principal was, you will make this much money. But that money on how much you earn is not what your bank account would say, okay? Like, let's say you started with $1 million. What this would say was maybe you made 60,000, okay? So you'd have like this equation would spit out 60,000. It wouldn't be 1 million plus 60,000. So just careful, okay? Understand the difference. So reading this problem really, or any of these examples that we're going to do here, it's really just read them and identify which what piece of information is, like any word problem, what piece of information is being given, what variable is being defined in the word problem, all right? So Dylan invested $4,800 for 60 days at 6.8%. How much interest did he earn from this investment? So Dylan invested $4,800. Well, that is the only thing that has units of dollars, essentially. So really, the interest, interest earned will be dollars, but Dylan invested. I guess the way to think about this is the initial, right? So that would be your then principal. So right now we have P being equal to $4,800 for 60 days. Okay, well, this piece of information right here, I should underline it really. This piece of information right here is telling you that the total time that you are investing it is 60 days. However, notice right here, this needs to be in years. So we have to convert 60 days into years. So how do we do that? Well, we need to divide this by 365 days for every year, right? It's because we want to know how much of those 60 days is part of our year. So our T, I need a calculator to do this, 60 divided by 365. So this would be 0.164. Go to 3 decimal places, that's enough. All right, so years. So he had it in there for 0.164 of a year. And then lastly, at 6.8%. Well, 6.8% is your annual interest rate, okay? That is your variable R. Percentage equals R, right? But the problem is this needs to be in a decimal, okay? Needs to be in a decimal. So in order to put that into a decimal, 6.8 divided by 100, well, that is now 0.068. That is what the number you are going to be using. And then the last thing, reading the question, is how much interest did he earn from this investment? Well, that's looking for I. So this whole problem, how much interest did he earn? That tells you I is our question mark. We're looking for that. So just put it all together. We have our formula, all right? I is equal to PRT. So then we are looking for I. I is our principal, which was $4,800, multiplying that by, I should have wrote smaller here. Let me just reduce the size right here. Let me just reduce the size. And call that I here. Okay. So 4,800, multiplying that by the rate, and our rate is right here, 0.068, just plugging that in. And then our time is right here, 0.164. So really the math behind this isn't hard. It's just a calculator problem at this point. So we literally just go 4,800 on our calculator times 0.68 times that by 0.164. And I get 53.53. Okay, and round this one to 2 decimal places because it's a dollar, right? This has units of dollars. Interest earned, and I guess I should say right here, this has units of dollars. This has units of dollars. So they earned 53.53. All right, example 2. Let's try it again. Ashley invests $8,500 for 6 months. Well, here we go. Invest $8,500. There is your principal. Your P is $8,500 for 6 months. Okay. Well, this tells you your T is equal to, well, 6 months. But again, we need that in years. So how many months are in a year? 6 months divided by 12 months per year. So this is B equal to 0.5 years. In an account that earns 3.6 interest per year, okay, so 3.6 percentage, divide that by 100 because we need it in a decimal, is 0.036. That would be our rate value. So then, what amount will Ashley receive when the investment matures? Okay, so this word mature in the world of finance, that just means when it comes to an end, okay? I don't know, those who eventually go into finances or start investing in the real world, if you ever bought like bonds or something, the maturing will be like this bond will mature in 30 years. It just means that, like, okay, you're in it for 30 years, or your mortgage matures in 30 years. All right, it just means end. This word just means ends. All right, so we have our formula. Oh, sorry. I is equal to P R T. So now you just plug it in. We are looking for, in this case, what amount will she receive? So this is, again, how much will you receive? How much interest? So it's not saying what will her total account be worth. It's how much will she receive. So she will receive when she takes 8,500 and she puts it in at rate at 0.36 and for 0.5 years. All right. Well, let's use our calculator. 8,500 times it by 0.036 times it by 0.5. There would be $153 earned over that, okay? So $153 was earned. Marco bought a $500 GIC. All right, a GIC is just a type of investment. It's a very, very safe investment. Okay, GIC is like a guaranteed income. It just means that a bank will say, if you give us your money for 3 years, we will guarantee that you will get 4% on your money. It's the safest thing you can do. You're guaranteed it. Okay, so that's what a GIC is. It's just a type of investment. So Marco bought a $500 GIC. It has a 3-year, and I'm not going to test you on this, by the way. I'm not testing you on GIC maturing, okay? I think these are just putting these questions just for knowledge sake, right? Because in my opinion, this is probably the most applicable thing that you're going to be doing in your real world. Like, it's definitely in your benefit to understand finances, right? We all live in a world where we use our money to go to Starbucks and this and that, okay? So very, very applicable. So just these little nuggets of information I'm sharing with you, the idea of what a GIC is. All right, I'm not testing you on it, but it's just probably good to know. So Marco bought a $500 GIC. It has a 3-year term and earns 3.25% compounded annually. how much interest will the GIC have earned at maturity? Okay, all of these terms in here. All right. So how much have they earned at maturity? So when it ends, that's what that means, all right? But the only thing here is this whole compounded annually. Well, actually, to answer this question, I guess this is thrown in this lesson because it just shows you how this is different. This is not simple interest. So this tells you this is not simple, okay? So it's either you're simple or you're dealing with compounding. So the fact that you see that word compounded, you have to approach this problem differently. And what makes compounding different from simple, if we go back to the very beginning of the lesson, or even just how we do these problems, whenever I was calculating my interest earned, this $160 came from me taking my principal, what I initially invested, and that's how I got my 160. What makes compounding different, all right, is in this case, when I take my $500, that's my initial, okay, so $500 is my principal, The interest I am earning in year one, so I'll set up like a table. In the first year that goes by, you still use your simple interest formula, where the interest being earned is still, like, the concept is still the same. We take $500, you are putting it in at a rate of 3.25%. 3.25% compounded annually. So we need that into a 3.25%. We need that into a decimal percent. Divide that by 100. So that's 0.0325. So our decimal is 0.0325. That's our rate, right? And then times our time. And our time, well, this is only 1 year, so we're only going by 1 year. So this is your P right here. This is your R right here. And this is your T, okay? So 1 year. So how much interest have they earned in the first year? Well, 500, which I've used a calculator, 500 times 0.0325. So that first year of interest will be only $16.25. But now, what makes compounding different from simple is in the second year, when I apply my formula, the interest I am earning is now the previous year's balance, okay? So this P, R, T, this principal right here is going to be the initial amount that you put in, your $500 plus your $16.25 that you earned. So now it counts for what is actually in your bank account. So when we apply our formula here, your interest you are earning is now taking $516.25, multiplying by all the same values, 325, and another year ticking by, okay? So notice, see how this number is smaller than this number? When we are doing our second year calculation, you are putting a larger number into our multiplication. So you will expect a larger number here. And that's what makes compounding so much better than simple, because you actually earn more money. It takes into account that now you have more money in your account, so you should earn more money with more money. And so if we do our compounding, 516.25, multiply that 0.325, in this case, we have earned $16.78. Yes, we're dealing with small amount of money, right? Like, not dealing with millions of dollars. But you can still see, look, here you made $16.25, but here you made $16.78. And that's because you had a little more money now in your account. So the interest being applied accounts for the fact that you have more money. Okay, now it's saying after 3 years, so we need to do it for another third year. So what makes this different again is when we calculate our interest, the principal that we are using is now your whatever is in your account. So what's in our account would be the $516.25, all right? But now it's plus the interest you earned for that year, 1678, okay? So all of this would be the principal for year 3, right? But then that year, that would still be being multiplied by your rate, which is 0.0325 times that final year, okay? So let's just do our math. The interest earned, and I'll just put the numbers out so you can see it. I mean, we'll give myself a little more space here. The interest earned is 516.25 plus 16.78. So here, the principal I am now applying is 533, right? This is what the amount is. Like, this is what your account would say when you're into your 3rd year, right? Like, look, it's more than this, and it's more than this. That's what makes compounding so good, okay? But again, we'll cover more in this in detail next lesson. But just so you see the effect, 0.325, and then 1. So the interest you are earning now would be 17 and 3, 2. Okay. So how much interest will GSE have earned at maturity? Well, let's look at what our final balance is. So if you look at your final principal, your principal after 3 years, sorry for the interruption. So the principal after 3 years, right? After 3 years, like what would be in your account? Actually, it wouldn't be the principal. It would be your final after 3 years. Well, it would be 533, right? 0.03, which would be this number you have for 2nd year, plus the interest you earned for that year, this one right here, plus the 1732, right? So that year, what your account would say would be 533.03 plus 17.32. So your account would read $550.35. Okay, if the question is saying how much have you earned in interest, well, the only thing that's making you money is the interest, right? And if you started this whole problem with $500, if your initial amount was $500, interest is the only thing making you money, well, how much money do you think you earned? Well, take this amount right here and subtract your initial. This is your total. So your total minus your initial equals your interest earned. Interest. So we have our 550.35. Take away what you started with, $500, and that means you would have earned $50.35. That is how much money you earned. That is your interest earned. Okay? So again, compounding, this example was a little more work. We will see more of it in next day's lesson. So if this was any bit confusing, do not worry, okay? This is more just like a little taste of where it's going, right? So it's slightly different from simple. So just know that there's 2 types of compounding, or 2 types of interest rates that can be applied. All right. So last example, an investment of $600 earned 24.20 at a simple interest. You see this word simple? Cool. You don't have to do the whole compounding thing where you have to account for your previous year's balance. So at a simple interest rate of 6.5% per year, how long was the investment held? Okay, so we have a $600, an investment of $600. So once again, your P is $600. That's your initial amount. All right. It earned $24.20. Well, what do you think that is? Well, the thing that makes you money is your interest. So that actually is what your I is. Your I is $24.20. Only 2 things that have the dollars in it. At a simple interest rate of 6.5% per year. Okay, so in this case, 6.5%, divide that by 100, is 0.065. That is your rate. The question says, how long, right? How long, why is my thing not, thing? There we go. How long? Well, this is saying T is question mark. We're looking for T. So if you set up your formula, I is P R T, well, essentially we are just rearranging the formula for T, right? These are all being multiplied by each other. So if we want to rearrange it for T, we would divide both sides by PR. PR. So these would cancel, and you'd be left with your formula. The interest you earned divided by your principal multiplied by your rate would tell you how long you had your investment in there for. So if we had $24.20 earned, and we initially started with $600, and the rate that we were given was 0.065, well, in order to have earned $24, we would have had to have it in for, let's do our math, 24, 2.20, divide that by 600, divide that by 0.065, that would give us 0.62. All right, doesn't say how long, doesn't say any units, so 0.62 of a year, because remember, this is always given into years, all right? So 0.62 of a year. All right, I'm not sure if it's coming through the headphones, but I am at the cottage right now, and I'm making this video because I've been sick for the past week, and so this is the first chance I've had to actually be able to talk, and I'm at the cottage and it's raining really bad, so maybe, hopefully it's kind of soothing as you're watching this video, listening to the rain. Okay, bye for now, and there is our homework. I will see you in class.